The champagne glass slipped from my daughter-in-law's hand the instant her mother collapsed on my marble kitchen floor. Foam bubbled at the corners of Helen's mouth, her body convulsing violently as screams echoed through the room. And all I could think, even as I dropped to my knees beside her, was that this wasn't supposed to happen to her. It was meant for me. After 70 years on this earth and decades surviving a ruthless business world, I wasn't a woman who missed details. When someone tries to poison you at your own retirement party, you notice, especially if that person has been staring at your bank account like a starving woman gazes at a feast. Only 2 hours earlier, my home had been glowing with laughter and celebration. I had just sold my consulting firm for $23 million, not bad for a company I built from scratch after my husband's death 15 years ago. My son Michael insisted on throwing the party, saying I deserved to celebrate. "Let Jessica handle everything, Mom. You just relax," he had told me with those sincere brown eyes that used to melt me when he was a boy. I should have been suspicious when Jessica, who usually groaned about loading a dishwasher, suddenly transformed into Martha Stewart, arranging flowers and polishing crystal as though her very life depended on it. The party was charming. 30 guests from my professional life, some neighbor's family, even a hired bartender to serve champagne. Jessica beamed her manicured nails, digging into my arm, as she told me nothing was too good for me. But while chatting with my former business partner, I saw her slip a small vial from her purse and pour its contents into one specific glass. The chipped rim made it unmistakably mine. My blood went cold, but I forced myself to keep smiling. I knew better than to shout or panic. Sometimes the only way to catch a snake is to let it think it has cornered a mouse. Jessica approached, offering me the glass with mock concern. "Sarah, you look tired. Have some champagne?" I accepted, thanked her warmly, then quietly swapped the glass with Helen's when no one was looking. Poor Helen sipped happily, remarking on its unusual flavor minutes before collapsing. As paramedics rushed in and Jessica wailed with almost convincing despair, I kept my eyes on Michael. His glance toward his wife lasted only a second, but after 32 years of motherhood, I knew what I was seeing: plans unraveling. At the hospital later that night, doctors listed Helen's condition as acute poisoning. Jessica paced like a nervous metronome, while Michael sat rigid, his phone buzzing unanswered. When I mentioned champagne casually, Jessica paled. Her reaction confirmed everything. Helen survived, thank God. But I drove home certain of one truth: my family had tried to kill me. By dawn, I was at my kitchen table, coffee steaming beside a legal pad, where I began tallying everything I knew. Michael's architectural firm was struggling. Jessica's jewelry boutique was a vanity project, and their lifestyle far exceeded their income. They lived in a mansion with luxury cars and designer wardrobes they couldn't afford. Over the years, I had gifted them nearly $200,000 house down payments, school tuition, endless emergencies. Maybe they hadn't seen those as gifts. Maybe they saw them as down payments on an inheritance they didn't want to wait for. The next morning, Michael appeared on my doorstep with pastries all warmth and concern. "Mom, we've been thinking about your safety," he said gently. "At 70, living alone in this big house, maybe it's time to consider a community." Sunset Manor. "It's wonderful. There's a spa, activities, medical staff." His voice softened. "It's only $400,000 up front. We could help you with the paperwork." The audacity of it. The poison had barely left Helen's system, and already they were pitching a retirement home. I nodded, smiled, and played along. I knew now what their plan was: move me out, gain power of attorney, control my assets, and quietly finish what the champagne had failed to do. But I hadn't survived 45 years in business by being anyone's fool. That afternoon, I phoned my attorney, David Hartwell. "David, I told him I need to see you right away." His calm, precise demeanor had guided me through my husband's death, the building of my business, and every major decision since. If my family thought they could manipulate me into surrendering my independence and fortune, they were about to learn how wrong they were. David's office, high above downtown, smelled faintly of leather and expensive cologne, the kind of place designed to inspire confidence. I told him everything: the party, the vial, the champagne glass, Helen collapsing, Michael's sudden concern about my future. David listened intently, jotting notes in his precise hand. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen thoughtfully. "You're certain about what you saw?" he asked. "As certain as I am that I'm sitting here." Jessica poured poison into my champagne glass. He nodded slowly. "The problem is proving intent. Even if we test the remaining champagne and confirm it contains poison, Jessica could argue she was adding a supplement or flavoring. Without proof, it was meant specifically for you, a prosecutor might struggle to press attempted murder." "Then let's get the champagne tested," I insisted. "We can, but Sarah, even with proof, they may pivot to another strategy. If Jessica and Michael are after your fortune, they might not stop with poison. They could attempt to challenge your competency in court. At your age, living alone after a major life change, it wouldn't be difficult to raise doubts. Once you're declared incompetent, guardianship would give them control of everything." The pieces clicked into place. The nursing home suggestion wasn't just convenient, it was calculated. Isolate me, surround me with medical staff who could be persuaded to note confusion or decline, and back it all with a compliant psychiatrist. "What do I need to do?" I asked. David pulled out a thick folder. "First, we document your current mental capacity. I'll arrange a professional evaluation immediately. Second, we restructure your estate. We'll create trusts, healthcare directives, and financial safeguards. If they try to seize control, the law will already be on your side." His voice hardened. "If Michael and Jessica want to play games, we'll make sure they're playing by your rules." Over the next 2 hours, we outlined protections that would trigger audits if anyone accessed my accounts, directives specifying exactly who could and could not make medical decisions, and a new will that placed my fortune under tight control. When I left, I felt steadier, though David added one last warning. "Consider your physical safety, Sarah. If they tried once, they'll try again. Install cameras, sensors, even a panic system. Be cautious." I returned home determined. That night, I barely slept, imagining how close I had come to drinking from that chipped glass. By morning, technicians were installing security cameras and alarms throughout my house. The neighbors believed I was worried about package theft, which was close enough to the truth. By evening, my home was wired tighter than most jewelry stores. Later that day, David's courier delivered my updated will and trust documents, freshly signed and notarized. If Michael expected to inherit everything, he was in for a shock. My new arrangements left him only a modest annual trust, $50,000 a year. Enough to live comfortably, but not extravagantly. Jessica received nothing. The bulk of my estate was designated for medical research and charities I had supported for years. Attempted murder, I decided, was where I drew the line on family generosity. I was reviewing the documents when my doorbell rang. Through the new security monitor, I saw Michael and Jessica on my porch. They stepped into my living room with grim faces, Jessica perched on the edge of the sofa, Michael glancing uneasily at the camera in the corner. "New security?" he asked. "Package theft," I said smoothly. "You can never be too careful." Jessica dabbed her eyes with a tissue. "Sarah, we feel awful about what happened. If something we brought caused Mom's collapse—" "Don't be silly," I interrupted. "It wasn't anything you brought." "But what if it was?" Michael pressed his eyes, shining with false concern. "What if something had happened to you, Mom? We couldn't forgive ourselves. That's why we think you should stay with us for a while, just until we're sure you're safe." There, it was, the script. Get me under their roof, keep me monitored, make their next move easier. I let the silence stretch, watching their faces. Jessica's eyes were sharp with desperation. Michael's with anxious guilt. "How thoughtful," I said finally. "But I'm safe here." "Are you, though?" Jessica's voice sharpened. You're 70 years old, Sarah. What if you fall? What if you have a heart attack and no one finds you for days? I leaned back in my chair, studying her. You're absolutely right. Anything could happen at my age. That's why I spent the day updating my will. The air dropped several degrees. Michael's face went pale. Jessica's hand twitched. Your will? She asked carefully. Oh, yes. It was terribly out of date. But now it reflects my current priorities. I gave Michael the same smile I'd once used when catching him in a childhood lie. You know how these things go. Their silence was thunderous. When they finally left, they sat in my driveway for 10 minutes, arguing furiously before Jessica called someone waving her arms angrily, while Michael tried to snatch the phone away. I poured myself wine and settled in my chair. The game had only begun, and they had no idea how much longer I'd been playing it. The following morning, an unexpected visitor arrived. Helen, pale but determined, clutching her purse like a shield. Sarah, I need to talk to you about the other night, she said. Jessica told me I had a reaction to medication, but Sarah, I don't take medication. I remember the champagne tasting bitter. I saw Jessica near the drinks table with a small bottle. I think she tried to poison you. I poured tea, my hand steady. You're right, Helen. She did. But I switched the glasses. You drank what was meant for me. Her face drained of color. She tried to kill you, and I almost died instead. We sat in silence, two women bound by betrayal. What will you do? Helen asked finally. Give them exactly what they want, I replied. Just not in the way they expect. After Helen left, I knew I needed more than suspicion. I needed information. So I called an old business contact, Patricia Williams, who now ran a private investigations firm. Patricia, I need to know everything about my son's finances. Bank accounts, loans, investments, all of it. There was a pause before she answered. Sarah, family information can be painful. I'm prepared, I told her. Give me 48 hours. While Patricia dug into their financial skeletons, I arranged a lunch with Michael. We met at the restaurant where we'd celebrated milestones over the years, his graduation, his wedding, the birth of his daughter. Nostalgia softened the edges of what I had to do. Michael arrived nervous, checking his phone repeatedly. How are you, Mom? You sounded upset when you called. I've been thinking about what you and Jessica said about planning for the future, I replied, watching his eyes light up. What kind of changes? I think you're right. Sunset Manor might be the safest option. Relief and eagerness washed over his face. That's wonderful. They had an opening, remember, but it needs to be filled quickly. You'll need to pay by Friday. Yes, I said softly, memorizing every flicker of excitement on his face. I thought maybe you and Jessica could help me with the paperwork. Of course, he said quickly. I sipped my coffee, studying the boy I'd raised. Part of me wanted to believe his concern was genuine, that he'd been manipulated by Jessica's greed. But another part of me knew better. Patricia called 2 days later, her tone grim. Sarah, it's worse than you imagined. The house is refinanced 3 times over. They're drowning in debt, credit cards, loans, nearly $80,000 outstanding. Michael's business has been failing for years. They're paying bills with other credit cards. It's desperation. I closed my eyes, though none of this surprised me. Anything else? Yes. Jessica took out a life insurance policy on you 6 months ago. $500,000. She's listed as the beneficiary. My blood froze. How? She claimed insurable interest as your caregiver. The company must have assumed Michael was the true beneficiary. But Sarah, it means they've been planning your death for months. Patricia hesitated, then added, Michael's been making regular payments to a Dr. Richard Steinberg, a geriatric psychiatrist. Small amounts consultation fees. They began 3 months ago. The name unsettled me. I promised to follow up with David. That afternoon, Michael and Jessica arrived with a briefcase full of papers. They spread them across my dining table, excitement thinly veiled beneath their concern. "This is the admission contract," Jessica explained, her voice smooth. "And this form lists all your assets so they can calculate monthly fees." Michael slid another paper toward me. "And this is the power of attorney. It's standard, Mom. Just so I can handle financial decisions if you can't." I read carefully. It was anything but standard. Signing would give him immediate authority over every account, every investment, every asset. "This seems broad," I said lightly. "Do I really need to grant so much authority?" Michael's smile was gentle, rehearsed. "It's just precaution, Mom. At your age, it's best to let someone younger handle things." I glanced at Jessica. "And if I change my mind about Sunset Manor?" They exchanged a quick look before Jessica replied. "Technically, you can leave, but the facility has strict policies. Medical evaluations, waiting periods? Complicated, really." "How convenient. Once inside, they could have Dr. Steinberg declare me incompetent and trap me indefinitely." "I need to think overnight," I said, gathering the papers. "Mom, remember the deadline," Michael urged. "I'll have an answer in the morning." After they left, I called David. "Tell me about Dr. Steinberg." David was silent for a long moment. "He's known for competency evaluations. But Sarah, he's notorious for siding with families who want control. If your son's been paying him, it's likely to secure an evaluation declaring you unfit." It was clearer than ever. Jessica and Michael weren't simply greedy. They had designed a meticulous plan. Poison me if possible. If not, isolate me in Sunset Manor, use Steinberg to declare me incompetent and seize control of my fortune. They believed they had me cornered. "David," I said quietly, "I need something prepared by tomorrow morning. Something they'll never see coming." That night, I sat in my study reviewing the trap I intended to set. Tomorrow, they would walk in expecting to secure my signature and my fortune. Instead, they would be stepping into the kind of carefully orchestrated checkmate only decades in business could prepare. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzling, a fitting backdrop for the performance about to unfold. Michael and Jessica showed up at 9 a.m., sharp-dressed as though for a corporate board meeting. Jessica's smile was bright and brittle, Michael's eagerness barely disguised. "Have you decided, Mom?" he asked, settling into my living room. "I have," I said, sliding the signed paperwork across the table. "I think you're right. It's time I start a new chapter. Sunset Manor will suit me." Jessica nearly sagged with relief. "Oh, Sarah, you'll love it there." "And Michael?" I added smoothly. "I've signed the power of attorney papers, too." His hands trembled as he took the documents. "This is the right decision, Mom. You won't regret it." For the next hour, they spread out financial forms, Jessica typing furiously as I listed account numbers. Every so often, they exchanged glances like children unwrapping forbidden presents. They thought victory was within reach. "There's just one final detail," I said. "My attorney needs to sign off for tax purposes. He's coming by any moment." The doorbell rang on cue. But it wasn't David who entered. It was Detective Lisa Morrison and another officer. "Mrs. Wilson, we need to speak with you about a suspected poisoning at your home earlier this week." Jessica's face drained of color. Michael shot to his feet. "What kind of poisoning?" Detective Morrison's eyes swept between them. "The toxicology report shows your mother, Helen Peterson, ingested a concentrated amount of oleander extract. The champagne bottle from the party contained the same poison. Someone deliberately tampered with it." The silence was suffocating. Jessica's voice cracked. "Why would I poison my own mother?" "That's exactly what we're asking," the detective said. "Especially since the glass with the highest concentration was intended for Mrs. Wilson." I met Jessica's wild eyes. "I saw you pour it into my champagne glass?" "I switched it with Helen's." Michael turned to his wife in shock. You did this." "I didn't," Jessica shrieked. "This is insane." But the detective produced another document. "We also found you recently purchased a $500,000 life insurance policy on Mrs. Wilson. With you as the beneficiary, that gives you motive." Jessica's mask cracked completely. As they cuffed her wrists, she spat venom at me. "You think you're clever? You have no idea what you've started." "On the contrary," I replied calmly, I know exactly what I've done. When the police left with Jessica, Michael collapsed into a chair, his face ashen. Mom, I didn't know about the poison. I swear. She said it was about keeping you safe. She said you were making poor decisions, becoming forgetful. Tears brimmed in his eyes. We're drowning in debt. She said if something happened to you naturally, we'd inherit enough to start over. I thought we were planning for the inevitable, not murder. I studied him, torn between the boy who once brought me dandelions and the man who now sat before me complicit in betrayal. Show me your phone. What? Your text messages with Jessica. Reluctantly, he handed it over. I scrolled through their exchanges, Jessica pressing him about Sunset Manor, about moving quickly about my money. And then, a chilling line, trust me. By Sunday, she'll be begging us to take care of her. I handed the phone back. You knew. Maybe not the method, but you knew she planned to harm me. Michael buried his face in his hands. I thought she meant staging something, an accident, a scare. I didn't think she'd really... But you still planned to strip me of my independence. You hired Dr. Steinberg months before this party. His silence confirmed everything. Finally, he whispered, Jessica said it was just a precaution. If you refused to sign, Steinberg would declare you incompetent. I let the weight of his words hang in the room. Then I said, Michael, the papers you signed today, the power of attorney, they're fake. Prepared by David. They give you control of exactly $1. His head snapped up, eyes wide. My true estate is secured in trusts you can never touch. Your inheritance will be modest, and if you're convicted of conspiracy, even that disappears. You've destroyed my life, he whispered. No, I said quietly. You destroyed your own? I merely refused to let you destroy mine. 3 months later, my roses were in full bloom, their scent drifting across the garden as I sat with a glass of wine. The chaos had settled into a strange new normal. Jessica was sentenced to 15 years for attempted murder. Michael received 3 years for conspiracy, his lawyer managing to soften the charges, though not erase them. Their daughter, my granddaughter Emma, called one evening, her voice thick with guilt. Grandma, I'm so sorry. I had no idea what they were planning. Can I visit this summer? Of course, sweetheart. I told her, my chest aching with relief that at least one branch of my family tree still reached toward the light. She was 16, old enough to see her parents' betrayal for what it was, young enough to choose a different path. Helen Peterson had become my unlikely companion. We met for coffee twice a week, 2 women bound by betrayal and survival. You know, Helen said one morning, stirring her tea, they almost got away with it. They never stood a chance, I replied. I've dealt with people trying to take my money for decades. The only difference this time was blood. Helen chuckled bitterly. Do you regret it, sending them both to prison? I considered the question. Michael was my son, the boy I had raised, the man who once brought me wildflowers from the yard. But he was also the man who had conspired to lock me away, strip me of my life's work, and watch me fade. I regret that it was necessary, I said finally. But I don't regret protecting myself. A knock on the door interrupted us. David Hartwell stood with his ever-present briefcase, a rare smile softening his features. Good news, he said, as I ushered him inside. Jessica's insurance policy has been voided due to her conviction. The premiums will be returned, and Michael's creditors are seizing his assets. That includes the house you helped them buy. Would you like to make an offer? I thought about that house, its granite countertops, cathedral ceilings, every luxury they'd wanted so desperately. No, I said. Let it go to someone who earned it honestly. David nodded approvingly, then handed me another folder. Your trust restructuring is complete. Your money is protected in perpetuity. If anyone attempts to declare you incompetent, the trust automatically transfers to charity. I exhaled deeply, the relief washing through me. For the first time in months, I felt truly untouchable. That evening, Emma called again, excitement in her voice. Grandma, I got accepted to Northwestern's pre-law program, just like you suggested. Tears welled in my eyes. Congratulations, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. Maybe that was the real victory, not merely surviving my family's betrayal, but ensuring that the next generation could choose differently. Emma would grow up understanding that money was a tool, not a goal. That love meant support, not exploitation. The following week, Helen and I sat in my garden watching the roses sway. You know, she said thoughtfully, your story ought to be a lesson. Not just about greed, but about strength. I smiled faintly. Strength is often mistaken for youth, but I've learned that age doesn't strip you of power unless you let it. At 70, I may be slower, but I am not powerless. The truth was simple. My son and daughter-in-law had underestimated me, mistaking gray hair for weakness, independence for vulnerability. But I had spent a lifetime navigating predators in boardrooms and backrooms alike. They had walked into my home thinking I was prey. Instead, they discovered just how dangerous an old woman could be when cornered. The garden glowed under the fading sun. My home, once a fortress under siege, now felt peaceful, protected by cameras' alarms and the ironclad walls of the law. I had wealth enough to live comfortably, security enough to sleep soundly, and resilience enough to face whatever years remained. The game had ended. I had won. But it wasn't victory that comforted me most. It was the reminder that survival is not about strength or age. It's about clarity, strategy, and refusing to surrender. That summer, Emma came to stay for 2 weeks. She was taller now, more self-assured, and yet still the same girl who once held my hand crossing busy streets. We cooked dinners together, walked through the garden, and talked late into the night about her dreams. She asked hard questions too, about her parents, about betrayal, about whether love could survive such wounds. "Grandma," she whispered one evening, "do you hate them?" I sat quietly, the cicadas humming in the background. "Hate is too heavy to carry," I told her. "I don't hate them. I pity them. They had love, trust, and support, and they chose greed instead. That's a kind of poverty worse than debt." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to be like them." "You won't be," I said firmly. "Because you've already learned the lesson they never did. Money means nothing without integrity." When she left for Northwestern, she hugged me so tightly I could hardly breathe. "I'll make you proud," she promised, and I believed her. Helen, meanwhile, followed through on her idea of writing. She began drafting a book on elder abuse, using our story as one of many examples. "People need to know," she said over coffee, "that manipulation can be just as dangerous as a weapon. Families aren't always safe havens." I encouraged her, though privately. I wondered if anyone would truly believe the extremes we had lived through. Sometimes the most ordinary neighborhoods conceal the darkest betrayals. Months passed, and life found a calmer rhythm. My days were filled with gardening, reading, and lunches with Helen. Yet every so often, I caught myself staring at the chipped champagne glass, now tucked away in a drawer. I couldn't bring myself to throw it out. It was a reminder of how close I'd come to becoming another headline about an old woman found dead after natural causes. But instead of breaking me, that moment had sharpened me. It taught me that survival at 70 isn't about pretending to be young. It's about using the wisdom of years, the lessons learned from every betrayal, every deal, every hard day, and wielding them like armor. When David stopped by with another update, news that all final legal battles had closed and my fortune was now beyond reach, I felt a strange peace settle over me. My legacy was secure. My independence was mine. My enemies were behind bars. And yet I knew the story wasn't just about winning against Michael and Jessica. It was about proving something to myself, that growing older doesn't mean surrendering power, that vulnerability is not weakness, and that even when betrayal comes from those closest to you, you still have choices. You can protect yourself. You can fight back. One evening, as the sun painted the sky gold, I sat among my roses and thought about my husband. He used to say, "You're not paranoid if they really are after you." He'd have laughed at how right he was. But I also imagined him proud of me, proud that I had outmaneuvered the very people who thought age made me fragile. The truth is simple. I may be 70, but I am far from powerless. Anyone who mistakes gray hair for weakness risks learning the cost of underestimating me. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't vengeance at all. It's simply living well, sleeping peacefully, and ensuring those who plotted against you can never enjoy the fruits of their schemes. So I water my roses, drink my wine, and plan my next chapter. Not as a victim, not as a frail old woman, but as someone who has lived, fought, and endured, and who still has plenty of life left to live on her own terms. If you've listened this far, take this as a reminder. Age does not define strength. Guard your independence fiercely, protect your worth, and never let anyone convince you that you are powerless. Thank you for being here with me through my story. If it touched you, please like this video, share it with others who might need the reminder. Subscribe for more and tell me your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story too.